Community cider making. We use the word forgotten because the trees that we get the fruit from were once planted for their fruit, but now they're not utilized. I grew up about 20 minutes north of here in Gibsonia on a property with about 14 apple trees. There's only about half of those trees there, sadly now, but we had pear trees, peach trees, apricot, plums, cherries, and of course apples. Black raspberries, blackberries, grapes. It was blueberries. It was a wonderland. I want to see a show of hands here if you grew up with a fruit tree at home. Okay, keep those hands up. Maybe you had a fruit tree at a family member's house or a neighbor's house. Just keep them up. No? Okay. All right. So, did you ever try? Keep your hands up if you ever tried a piece of that fruit. Okay. Yeah. Keep your hands up if you ever made a pie or maybe made some applesauce from that fruit. Okay? Now keep your hands up if your family utilized all the fruit from that tree, okay, without hardly any waste, and it was a staple part of your diet. Okay? Right, okay? We don't do that. For whatever reason. You know, there are places in the world where people do that. You know, maybe it's industrialization, maybe it's wealth, who knows, like the United States. But regardless, to some extent, we've become disconnected, okay? Disconnected to the trees that bear the fruit, disconnected to the seasons that bring the harvest, and we've forgotten what to do with the harvest whenever it comes, okay? So I remember a time when I was foraging apples in Lawrenceville a few years ago. It was a decade ago. It was 2013, and there was somebody there who was a little boy the age of my daughter. I don't know where she is right now. And we were picking these apples, and this kid said to me, "Are those apples?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can you eat them?" I said, "Yes." And so I gave him an apple, one of the nicer ones that was in the bucket that we were picking, and I said, "Here you go." And I'm thinking to myself, 10 years later, maybe I should have asked his parents if it was okay or told him to go wash it. But the point of the story here is I was just shaking my head. It's just like, I can't believe this kid didn't realize that this was something he could eat. Then, that pushed me to remember a story from my childhood. I was probably about that same age, 9 years old, the age of my daughter, and my mom told my friends and I to pick apples from our apple tree, put them in paper sacks, and take them down to the end of our yard by the street and sell the bags of fruit for 50 cents a bag. Buy a pop across the street at the gas station, with that, so that would have been a pretty good incentive. But, really it was, I think it was my mom just trying to keep us out of her hair for the day, and we spent the day yelling at cars, which was a lot of fun. And at some point, my first grade teacher drove by. Her name was Mrs. Roseberry, which is interesting because, apples are a part of the Rose family, but I digress. She came up to us, and I don't know if she came up to us because I think she might have been concerned that we were hanging out by the street, because it was kind of a busy road. But then she asked us or maybe, I think I was afraid that she was going to yell at us for yelling at cars, but we were trying to get people to buy apples. She asked if she could buy some of these apples, and I told her no. Okay, even though that's why we were there, I told her no. Okay, and the reason I told her no is because the fruit that we got from our trees was pitted, it was gnarly looking, and it had some insect damage, and I was embarrassed because I didn't see the value in the fruit. Okay, so my mom made me go down to her house, walk all the way down with the wagon, which is about a half mile away, and give her a couple bags. And she probably gave me money, but I was told not to take any money for it. I think she might have given me $3 for 3 bags or something. But here I am in my 30s, and a 9-year-old kid didn't understand the value of the fruit, or even that it was edible. And I remembered that there was a time when, even though I had this bounty that I grew up with, I didn't appreciate or see the value in the fruit. Okay. Why does this matter? Okay, why does this matter? So I talked to a coworker one time because I was talking about cider. Okay, and she said, my neighbor has apple trees. there's tons of them. I'm like, do you ever eat them? She's like, no. I'm like, why not? Because I'd be afraid it would have bugs in it. Okay, I'm like, okay. But you eat apples from the grocery store that they probably have pesticides on them. She's like, yeah, okay. So why does this matter? There are estimates that 20 to 40% of food that is made or grown or raised, it doesn't make it to the consumer, okay? 40%. I was talking to my friend who runs a compost company, and I was using the stat of 20 to 40%. And he said, actually, it's a little bit more on the 40 end of things, and it seems to increase every year, okay? It's estimated that 800 to 900 million tons a year of food go to waste, okay? So, and it's not just that we're worried about things going into the landfill and running out of landfill space, but you're thinking about all the water that goes into this food, okay? You're thinking about all of the fossil fuels that move this food, okay? And you think about the unsustainable growing practices and potentially, the use of pesticides, extra stuff that happens for stuff that's getting wasted, okay? The less connected that we are with these trees, okay, and the fruit that comes from these trees, the less connected we are to our food, and the less we question what we are putting into our bodies and what's happening in the world in general. And we can't, at this point in history, we can't be more concerned, with what we're putting into our bodies, because childhood obesity, diabetes, and heart disease are on the rise, okay? So it's important to have these conversations and make these connections. Make these connections to, where your food is coming from. It comes from a tree. It doesn't just magically appear in the grocery store, okay? And it's important to have these conversations early, okay? We were pressing cider one day at our house, and there was a guy who came up to me and he said, I'm smiling right now because I think this is the first time that my kid has eaten food that wasn't from a grocery store. And I just want to sort of tell you that I sort of explained before that us with a few bad apples, we didn't have all these connections made right from the get-go, we didn't have we weren't asking these questions when we started making cider. Our cider making started in 2004. If you've grown up around Western Pennsylvania, everywhere you drive in the fall, you see these little round red and green orbs in all these trees. Now, when we see this phenomenon, we talk about having apple fever because we want to try to get them all, and try to make cider with them to whatever extent we can. So in 2004, we got a food processor and a cheesecloth, and we made some of our first cider. And then I had a Mr. Beer kit at that time, and rather than buying syrups and whatnot to make mediocre beer, we said, we should get our hands on a cider press. And so my friend Ryan got his grandfather's, he went to a family reunion, and he found out, he was looking around for somebody who might know where he could get a cider press, and there just happened to be somebody there who had this 1860 cider press. So he borrowed his grandfather's truck and drove down to North Carolina to get this cider press. And so that's how A Few Bad Apples started. But it wasn't A Few Bad Apples, what we do now. It started with A Few Bad Apples, but our consciousness about what we were doing wasn't really formed yet. And about in 2000, at that point in time, we would split the cider up with everybody who made it, and we would go to parties, and we would be huge hits at the parties, okay? And in 2009, I was sitting on the board of Allegheny Cleanways, and I shared cider at their holiday party for volunteers. I felt bad because I was doing it because I was just like, this cider really should be for the people who helped make it, and I'm bringing it this event, so maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But then I started to realize that what I was doing is I was really making a lot of connections myself about sustainability, and the people who were trying it were just blown away by our process and what we were doing, and how we were getting people thinking about different ingredients. If you come here in the fall, you will see tons of knobby, pitted pieces of fruit in the orchard here. And if I were to be with you in the orchard and hand you one and say sustainability and talk to all about sustainability, I may not necessarily get too far with you. But if I hand you a cup of cider made from those same apples, I can make you a believer. Because it's not hard to be inspired when you're looking down into a glass of amber cider and having your nose tickled by tiny bubbles. So in 2014, my father unfortunately passed when I was young, so I sort of picked up pruning by myself, But it wasn't until 2014 when somebody actually really showed me what to do. A man named TEDx. He lived in Wexford, not far from here, and he showed me how to prune. He actually unfortunately passed later that year. But and from that point forward, we started pruning apple trees every year. We weren't just taking; we were giving back. Okay. And in 2017, some of our cider making process changed a little bit. We started getting a little bit bigger equipment. A stainless steel grinder and a stainless steel apple press came along in 2020. But back in 2018, we started pruning these trees in Latotomy. We were asked by Meg Scanlon if we had any interest, and we had some interest. And these trees hadn't been pruned since the Nature Center started, and since it was taken over by North Park, around the Summer of Love. So we gave some love to these trees 50 years later, and here we are today. And so unfortunately, last year, we had a really, really bad year for fruit because we had a late frost and a pretty significant freeze. And so we ended up having to buy fruit for the first time. So that was kind of strange. And but we drove across the state to Adams County and got about $3,000 worth of fruit, and we made cider with it because we have this big cider fest every year as a benefit for Allegheny Cleanways, and we were able to do a $3,000 donation for that organization. That being said, since the beginning of what we've been doing, we feel like we've been able to touch people with talking about what we do, but we've also been able to donate tens of thousands of dollars worth of cider, tens of thousands of dollars worth of cash through charity events and fundraising, and much more than that in terms of work on people's family farms and orchards to help keep these trees alive. This last year, this crew behind me, we met some new friends at Butler. We met the son of this lovely couple back in 2019. And he said, I really want you to look at these trees. And the pandemic happened. We never really got back there, but we got there in 2023. And we were so touched to see the work that was put into those trees for that family, and for 40 years, and to kind of take the torch from them and keep it going. And so that's been some of the joys that we've been able to experience, not just drinking the cider, but connecting with people and being able to help people keep these trees going. So in terms of this orchard, like I said, we started here in 2018, and we started making cider from these trees. We've had some good years, we've had some bad years. It just depends on the weather, really. It depends on whether or not the trees set fruit before the freeze happened, and if there's a late freeze, that kind of throws everything off. And then we started making some cider with autumn olives here. And then just to a lesser extent, but also some multiflora rose hips here or there, and that turned into some that was pretty amazing because we were able to make a lot of ciders with invasive plants to kind of get people thinking about invasive plants and their impact on things. So typically, our process is we go out in the spring. Usually, actually, we go out typically the first week after New Year's, and we prune basically to the beginning of May or whenever the blossoms are out. Then we take a little break and do some events. And then in the fall, usually in August, we start pressing cider from the beginning of August through mid-October. And we go out and we try to get as much fruit as we can. And if we are doing some commercial cider throughout the year, typically we're buying the juice or we're buying the apples for that. And so most of the stuff that we harvest from this orchard or other family orchards are going to charity events. Like I said, we've been able to do a lot of different great things for different organizations like Allegheny Cleanways, Allegheny County Parks Foundation, Arts for Autism, TEDx Pittsburgh, Easter Seals, 412 Food Rescue, Hidden Harvest, and lots of other community organizations and arts organizations. We used to use a process that was very, very labor intensive with this old 1860s press that we've had to put a lot of work into over the years. But we decided that since we were making so much cider, we probably should only use that press periodically and get some equipment that would last a little bit longer. So that press now lives at Eden Hall at the Chatham School of Sustainability, where we do a cider class every fall. So we are about to embark on a journey of cider tasting, okay? And I'm gonna allow Jordan and Patrick and my wife Jennifer to talk about some of the ciders as we're pouring them. Some of the first taste, you're going to get a full pour. Some of the middle taste, you're going to get just a tiny bit because we only brought one bottle of the cider. But we don't, we want to be somewhat responsible because we are basically playing power hour at this point. So we want to not get too crazy. But thanks so much for coming out today, and let's get started. We can also make you a spritzer at any point in time that you might need it. If you need